Good evening and namaste, everyone. In the second session, we will be talking about the fall of Kabul and the way forward from the Afghan perspective. I extend a very warm welcome to the session chair, Harjeet Sandhu, retired IPS officer, counter-terrorism and law enforcement officer, Brussels, and speakers Ambassador M. Ashraf Haidari, Afghanistan's ambassador to Sri Lanka, Habiba Sarabi, former Minister for Women's Affairs in Afghanistan, and Shah Mahmood Miakhel, former First Deputy Minister of Defense in Afghanistan. We are delighted to have you all in our midst today. I now pass on the mic to Harjeet, sir. Over to you, sir. Sir, I think you're on mute.
Quickly is a yeah, thank you so much for the introductions, and also you saved our time by very quickly moving through the speakers list. So in fact, it is my privilege to be chairing this session where such distinguished personalities are there. And those who were expecting someone else as a chair, so some of them may be disappointed to see a different face. But since I am supported by a strong panel, so I think my few deficiency of the chair will be duly compensated by the speakers. And especially in this session, since it says that here we will be listening to the Afghan perspective. That's very important because the whole world keeps on talking about what is happening there. But we also have to listen directly from the horse's mouth from the Afghans there. I was listening to the briefing of Deborah Lyons, the Canadian diplomat who is a special representative of the Secretary General. On 9th September 2021, she presented the current situation that subsequent to Doha agreement and all that inclusivity, it was all promised, nothing happened. So we all those we have seen on TV, I think never ever in the world we have seen those glimpses of people falling down from the planes. These things in real life, in my 65 years, I'm now 65 years old, I've never seen or heard anything like this, that people are so desperately trying to get out of that place, and they were clinging on to the aeroplane wings. We all saw that. This will remain etched in memory of every one of us. And the subsequent chaos that happened, then the protests, no inclusivity in the new government, no women there, no non-Taliban member, no figures from past government, no leaders of minority groups. Of course, 2-3 were subsequently added on Pakistan's intervention. And most of the leadership is same, which was in the previous Taliban. People say Taliban 2.0 version will be different from Taliban 1.0, but we have most of the same people. Many of the 33 names presented include those on the sanctions list. The Prime Minister, 2 Deputy PMs and Foreign Minister, they all have been, because I worked on UN Security Council's sanctions panels during 2000 to 2002, so I'm familiar with some of those initial resolutions and how those lists were prepared. So I will, before giving to the panel members, I just last sentence, I put it in today's morning paper. I was reading Dr. Vikram Singh, former Director General of Police of UP, Uttar Pradesh. The title was Weakening Kabul, Worried Pakistan, and Unhappy West. So these 3 words, weakening Kabul, because probably whether from Kabul they can control rest of the region or not, the different groups, the Kandahar group is going different direction, Kabul group is going different direction, and unhappy West. We heard Professor Christian Cornert, I joined only in the last few minutes, but I know his views on that, and people are. So with this, I will pass on to the various panel members, and then we have some questions. So in the same sequence, the list which is here. So I would invite Ambassador Ashraf Haidari, the former Afghanistan ambassador to Sri Lanka. So I think you are still the Ambassador Haidari. Yeah, my apologies, I withdraw the word former. You are still the ambassador, at least as per my knowledge. So over to Ambassador Haidari. Thank you. And you have around 15 minutes or so to put your side. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much for the introduction. Yes, I am the current ambassador of Afghanistan Islamic Republic, and thank you for putting together this forum, including foremost Afghans, because what has often been happening in our region, especially South Asia, is that South Asians get together and with a number of other experts from around the world without really adequate knowledge and insight into what has developed and evolved in Afghanistan to discuss Afghanistan. So we all appreciate those on this panel representing Afghan views to be invited to discuss what has happened in Afghanistan. So with that, I will discuss 4 key issues, and I'll make it as brief as possible within the 15 minutes, and then look forward to a good Q&A. First, I'll discuss the failed peace process and the spoiler effect. And second, I will focus on what has transpired since the illegal and forceful takeover of the government in Afghanistan. Third, the implications for the region and the world, as it was pointed out in other sessions of this forum. And then finally, the way forward. First, the failed peace process and the spoiler effect. I'd like to just provide some background information on when the peace process was relaunched. Of course, the Afghan people have always desired and demanded peace simply because Afghanistan, unfortunately, has been suffering from a large number of imposed conflicts over the past 40 years, including the past 20 years. So it is the demand and the need and desire of every Afghan to have peace. And as a result, we have, in one way or the other, have pursued peace over the past 20 years under the former President Karzai, and then, of course, President Ghani. And formally, he relaunched the peace process under the Kabul process in 2017. And that's when he offered unconditional talks with the Taliban, as well as a ceasefire, as a confidence-building measure, knowing that from different conflict resolution and peacemaking experiences around the world, that without a ceasefire, it's really hard to build confidence and to make gradual progress towards, a sustainable political settlement. Unfortunately, the Taliban since then, not only, of course, collectively speaking from the past 20 years, but since 2017, had been reneging and violating the commitments they either made just verbally or under pressure from a number of international stakeholders. And alongside this process, a number of other formats were launched, especially the Moscow format, where I headed our delegation twice in 2017. First, of course, included the 6 neighbors, and then it was expanded to include the Central Asians. Again, there, the consensus was very much the same, that for Afghanistan to stabilize, there is, of course, no solution by way of war, but talks, and those talks should immediately start with a ceasefire, which unfortunately the Taliban didn't agree with. And then, of course, we know about the peace process that also took off under the Trump administration. First, he pursued a South Asia conditions-based strategy, but unfortunately abandoned that, and then signed Special Envoy Khalilzad to jumpstart the peace process. But as we know, that excluded the government of Afghanistan. As a result, it mostly catered to what the Taliban had been demanding talking to Americans, sidelining the government of Afghanistan, the democratically elected government of Afghanistan. And that's exactly what happened. And the special envoy representative of the Trump administration effectively pursued a coercive mediation process where he systematically sidelined the government of Afghanistan, excluded the government of Afghanistan, and over time tilted the balance of power in favor of the Taliban, legitimizing them, as we know, and delegitimizing the Afghan government, or undercutting the government of Afghanistan, as much as we fielded a very comprehensive and inclusive and representative negotiating team, of course, a prominent member of whom Governor Sarabi, Minister Sarabi, as here she will talk. And as, of course, this was pursued, the administration's changed in the United States, and the Biden administration took over. And unlike what everyone had expected, including people like myself, the Biden administration carried on what the Trump administration had initiated, leaving Ambassador Khalilzad in his place to continue his coercive mediation, which culminated to the release of over 5,000 terrorists and drug traffickers, which, of course, the government of Afghanistan was unwilling to release, but we had to consult with the people of Afghanistan through a jirga where they authorized us to release those prisoners simply for the sake of peace. Remember that Afghans have always needed and desired peace, and as a result, they made this unprecedented concession. If you just look at the recent history of conflict resolution and peacemaking, no country, no legitimately and democratically elected government has ever made such a concession for peace. But we were pressured into it, but we consulted people, and people authorized the government of Afghanistan to do so, and we did so for the sake of peace. Well, the Taliban also made a number of commitments in return to reward that concession, which included a significant reduction in violence, followed by, of course, a comprehensive ceasefire, cutting ties with Al-Qaeda and other regional and transnational terrorist networks, and as well as preventing the return of the released terrorists from, to the battlefield. Unfortunately, we know that they reneged on all of those, especially as the Biden administration announced the withdrawal of their forces sometime in April, that by September 11th this year, that all their forces would be withdrawn. And as that happened, effectively, the Taliban and their state sponsor in the region, and of course, already realized that they had the time, well, if others had the watch. And then they completely realized that this is a withdrawal agreement and a surrender agreement, that they're going to withdraw, leaving the Afghan government, the Afghan forces on their own. And as that happened, the key enablers on which the Afghan National Security Forces relied on for years, and of course, the Deputy Minister Miakhir will speak to that, unfortunately, were also withdrawn. But our forces relentlessly fought back, defending Afghanistan. As of course, there's some misinformation and disinformation is going around that they didn't fight, but they bravely fought. That's why we lost over 70,000 Afghan forces over the past 20 years defending Afghanistan against external aggression. This is not just a typical insurgency. This is an insurgency that is backed by, full spectrum state institutional support, from intelligence to military to diplomatic to safe havens and the rest. So effectively, the Afghan forces have been fighting not just an insurgency, but of course, their regional state sponsor, and as well as support from other entities, for which we don't have time to discuss. And so to narrow this down, unfortunately, as the U.S. forces withdrew and as enablers almost vanished, unfortunately, our forces were demoralized. And that's also because at times they didn't receive the reinforcement that they needed. Other times they had not been paid for months. And elsewhere, of course, there were political deals that happened either for safe passage or shared ideology or ethnicity that
Ashraf, sir, you're on mute.
the Afghan people were still hopeful that the U.S. NATO would stay the course even until the Taliban reached the gates of Kabul. And unfortunately, that's when the president made a decision to leave, and he's explained his decision why he did so, of course, to prevent more bloodshed and street-to-street fighting in Afghanistan, reminiscent of the 1990s in the country. And then, of course, that led up to the illegal and forceful capture of the government in Kabul. And then, second, of course, when they captured Kabul, of course, infighting took place between the Taliban factions, those representing the southern region, those in the east, especially, of course, the Haqqani network, and those loyal to the state sponsor and those not so loyal to the state sponsor. The senior Taliban from the 1990s versus the more recent military commanders, younger, more radicalized, so that took about 2 weeks before they were able to announce an exclusionary interim government, which you pointed out as well, and in other sessions was pointed out as well, that of course it includes only the diversity of the Taliban, but nothing outside that. And that diversity is just what they call that is the most diverse that they can get, but excluding, of course, all political, social, ethnic, sectarian, and religious diversities of Afghanistan. All male, of course, mostly hardliners from the past and recent, and with 17 members sanctioned by the United Nations, which was pointed out. One, of course, blacklisted by the FBI with $10 million on his head. And they've never, of course, severed ties with regional and transnational terrorist networks. And that's why they were able to capture much of northeast of Afghanistan with the support of the IMU, Islamic Movement of Uzbekistan, and ETIM, East Turkestan Islamic Movement, with a focus on China and, of course, Al-Qaeda, as well as Jaish-e-Mohammed and Lashkar-e-Taiba fighters, and the fighters and militants that come from over 12,000 madrasas that are associated with some of the regional terrorist networks, which I pointed out to support the Taliban in the capture of much of Afghanistan. And since their, of course, establishment of the interim government, they just recently inaugurated 2 or 3 suicide squads in northern Afghanistan. And they've also stated that the rule of Amir al-Mu'mineen, which is, of course, the supreme leader of the Taliban, is extendable throughout the region and possibly throughout the world once their power has been consolidated in Afghanistan, because they think that they've just not defeated the government of Afghanistan, but that they've defeated the NATO alliance, And so that's how they think, and that's how they feel, that if we have defeated NATO, then, what is Tajikistan not to defeat, or Uzbekistan not to defeat, or even China? That's why ETIM is, just sheltered across the border from China, and that's why Chinese should be cautious as much as they have, embraced the Taliban and have been speaking and their support. Or the Central Asians. Remember that the members of the IMU are mostly Uzbek and Tajik, very well trained and extremely, violent and radicalized, who used to be enjoying safe havens in Pakistan, but they were kicked out of Pakistan into Afghanistan, and one of the large-scale military operations conducted by the Pakistani army. And of course, now we know the reports of the United Nations on the strengthening of Al-Qaeda and the deep ties, including family ties between the Taliban and Al-Qaeda, especially to the Haqqani network, whose prominent members and leaders are now included in the exclusionary setup, which I pointed out. And as a result, the probability of increased terrorist campaigns, insurgencies, individual attacks has really shot up, threatening international peace and security. Now increasingly financed by drug cultivation, production out of Afghanistan. Remember that it was under the control of the Taliban that Afghanistan supplied more than 90% of the world's demand for narcotics. Now, as Afghanistan's assets are frozen, the Taliban will continue relying on drugs revenues for their operations and sustenance. And that would mean, of course, implications for regional stability and as well as international security, undermining, of course, public health across the region and the world. So what should be the way forward? To summarize? Of course, from our perspective and the perspective of the Afghan people, the setup in Kabul lacks national legitimacy. It's simply not legitimate because the Taliban took power illegally and forcefully against the very clear provisions of the United Nations Charter, Chapter 7. It is very unfortunate that the United Nations, especially the UN Security Council, as much as has been on the same page when it comes to consensus, speaking against this, illegal and forceful capture of Kabul and abandoning of the peace process, and of course reneging on their commitments on the under the peace process, and especially the Doha Agreement that they signed with the United States. Unfortunately, they have not taken the kind of punitive action that the international law provides against external aggression wrapped in, this kind of insurgency that was very much and still is, foreign-based. And we all know when, the 2-week debacle that had been unfolding and they were not able to put together a government, that a regional foreign intelligence chief visited Kabul for 3 or 4 days to put together what is this illegal and forcefully, managed administration. And as a result, so no legitimacy, and as a result, no international recognition, including from their own regional state sponsor. On the one hand, of course, they've been speaking in favor of, unfreezing of the assets of Afghanistan and recognition. But on the other hand, they're not to recognize them simply because they understand that everything that has taken place over the past 3 months has been illegal under international law. Just to, the sanctions list is a clear example of that no country can, summon up the courage to do so, because if they do so, then the international system and international law will pretty much open up such opportunities for other such, non-state actors in cahoots with the state actors to take on, more states such as the Afghan state as it was attacked. So no international recognition should be extended to them as they lack legitimacy. And unless, of course, they meet the core conditions set by the people of Afghanistan and the international community, which include, of course, the basic human rights, including those of women, including women in the setup, as well as cutting ties with terrorist networks, preventing, of course, Afghanistan from being used by terrorist networks, and so forth. So what else the international community should do? As they do so, as they add, maintain pressure on the Taliban to meaningfully change. Of course, they should continue providing humanitarian aid, especially delivering on the recent pledges made at the Geneva conference hosted by the Secretary General, as 5 million people have been displaced, 20 million needing, urgent humanitarian aid. And all of that should be, again, conditioned to make sure that it reaches the people in need, not used for military means. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ambassador Haidari. It was so nice. I was tempted to tell you that time is running out, but you were speaking. Every point was so valid that I just could not have the heart to tell you that the time is because we also have a long list of questions. So maybe if the other speakers could slightly be brief so that we can also take into account the questions, the list I have received from some of the participants directly. So we will cover that. Thank you very much, Ambassador Haidari, for covering those developments since August 15th and the failure of the peace process. So now can you hear me? Yeah, okay, thank you.
We hear you, but your voice is echoing.
Yeah, that is why it was echoing to me. So I thought, okay, let me. If others could go on mute. No, I think you don't hear, right?
Now it's fine, sir.
Now it's fine. Okay. So we go to the next session, which is also equally relevant. That is the role of Pakistan in destabilizing Afghanistan and its false propaganda. Because Pakistan's role has been not only recent, it has been since the Soviet withdrawal that started in end of 89 and went early into 1990. So that time, some of those fighters, they had moved to Peshawar, and where they were sent across to various places, Bosnia and other places. I have some evidence on that during my previous investigations, but will not go into that. So let us hear directly from the key speaker, Mr. Shah Mahmood Miakhel, former Deputy Defense Minister of Afghanistan. So that will be coming directly from the person who was in charge there. And Mr. Shah Mahmood, as I said, kindly be brief so that we can also take care of the questions in the end. Thank you very much. Over to you.
Okay, thank you very much, and also convey my good morning, respect to everyone, because it is good morning here in Washington. First of all, this is very big topic, and we can discuss for days, and also for many of the historians and also the military experts or politicians and others. They will talk about what's happened in Afghanistan. It was a collective failures, and many will talk about that for years to come. Just to be brief, there are many myths and perception, wrong assumptions existing for decades about Afghanistan and also Afghanistan war. If you said it from the Soviet time, but it was before than that, because from the establishment of Pakistan, they have started these things. If you just, they harboring non-state actors or those people who were, not happy with their own governments, they're trying to shelter them and to give them a space and also training tools and others, and destabilize the neighbors. For example, if you just go back, the first Prime Minister of Pakistan, Liaqat Ali Khan, he was killed by an Afghan there who was, hosted by Pakistan at that time. But his speech was against the Afghans or Afghanistan, so he couldn't tolerate it in that meeting, and he just took out his pistol and killed Liaqat Ali Khan in that time. Look to the time of President Dawood, the same Mujahideen leaders, they were sheltered there and trained, and they sent them to Afghanistan to destabilize the government of President Dawood at that time. But the government was functioning and people were supporting the government. They couldn't do that much. If you go to the examples of the Mujahideen leaders who went to Pakistan during the time of the President Dawood. Of course, then the Soviet Union time, many Afghan refugees went. There was a Cold War, and that was a different scenario at that time. So just I will give you, in order to implement, Pakistan their own agenda or strategic dip policy to use the non-state actors, you need tools, you need organizations, you need resources. So for that reason, they have a special cell in the ISI in Pakistan system, Directorate S, which is, there was a lot of written about that. They established, and for that, they established organization, different Afghan and also Pakistani organization, for example, the Lashkar-e-Toiba, TTP, ISK, Taliban, and different other groups they established there. The reason was that they did use the same tactics, which they did it in 80s, they did it in 90s, and also they did recently. For example, they didn't want to have one group because one group might have a deal, might have a, not accept their ideas or their plan, and others. And that was the reason they have a different groups in each insurgencies or each terrorist groups. You see, there was a Mujahideen, different groups were existing at that time. There was not like one front was not existing. The same was here, Haqqani Network, Taliban, TTP, ISK. So they use them for different purpose and different reasons, they use that. So, of course, in order to have use these people or groups, they use sometimes religious, means. For example, they just say, okay, we were just fighting for Islam. They use Islam or religion as a tool to enhance their own political agendas. Sometimes they use nationalism, as a tool. For example, when they were supporting the Taliban in the beginning, they were saying, okay, these are, Pashtuns. We are supporting the government of Kabul as Pashtun has a minority there. So that was the reason they were using the tools of nationalism, and that, which was not based on the facts and reality. That was, I said, there's a lot of construct narrative existing there. And sometimes they use the local grievances. For example, in some places there's a grievances existing, and they use that as a tool to propagate and to use that. So they use, if you look to the tactics, they used it in the 80s, and now it was the same. In 2009, I wrote a paper which was established in Middle East Institute, repeating history and used the same tactics they used during the time of the Mujahideen, but with more sophistications, because technologies change and use different kind of tools now. For example, Facebook's, Twitter's, TV's access to information. This was not existing at that time. They used different tactics at that time, but now they use it with more sophistication here. So these are all, if you look to back, the reason was that if you go specific to Afghanistan, we know counterinsurgency always, if you don't have a safe haven outside, is not supporting by outside, or internal condition is not ripe, they cannot grow. So this was the case in 80s, and this was the case now. And this was, we had some, when I said it's collective failures, we had wrong policies from the Bonn Agreement, and then later on, how to run the government there, how undermining the democratic institution in Afghanistan, corruptions and just monopolization of power, and all these has an impact. We reached to this point. But in terms of Ambassador Haidari just mentioned is a peace process. Actually, there was no peace process. It was a contacts group. The peace process was not, starting, and they gave a more recognition, legitimacy to the Taliban. From the beginning, they opened the Qatar office. If you remember, they raised their flags there. So this was construct narrative by the Pakistan, and also by Qatar, and also by the US just wanted to leave Afghanistan. It was not for a peace process. And so that was the reason is it was not because of the Afghan forces were not capable to fight, but there were so many other factors were existing, and that was we reached to this kind of situations. Of course, for tools you use, Taliban and also the ISIS-K or Pakistan, they use different tactics. They just like target killing, intimidation, bribing. And if you remember, before the collapse of government, Pakistan invited so many political leaders to Pakistan. They just, agree with them and whatever deals they had it there. The ambassador of Pakistan was going to the houses of different political leaders, and they had a meeting with them. And so this was all orchestrated that we would like to have an inclusive government, this and that. But in the reality, nothing has happened. And they use everyone, the national, international actors for their own benefits. And they have a good structure in place. They are masters in these things. And they played this game for decades. It was not some new things was, happen. And we will see, and eventually this will be bad for Pakistan also. Because yes, you have a control sometime, but sometimes you will lose control when there are so many actors. And so that was the reason is now they're trying to strengthen those groups which they have a close relation. For example, Haqqani network, they have a very close relation. They work together for decades. They want to strengthen their powers in Kabul, not those other groups there. So this differences eventually, create a huge problem for Afghanistan. Already we are in a problem, but of course for the region and also for the international community, because this is like franchise of different terrorist groups existing now, and to keep the interests of all these groups together, it is not easy, because if go for ETIM or IMU or ISIS-K or Haqqani network, TTP and others, so this will be very hard to keep all these groups together, because each one has a different agendas, different views, and also we will see how this emerging these kind of situation. Of course, Afghanistan is in difficult situation now. Like you mentioned in the beginning, the people were jumping to the planes and were falling from that. It was you have not seen it, which was very sad. The reason was that even all the borders are closed, flights are not existing. They don't see their hope with Taliban. The narrative which was constructed, Taliban 2.0 is better than 1.1 and others. This was also false things, because when they came, they removed the flag of Afghanistan, which was a national flag. They, announced their own Amarat-e Islami, not the republics. They appointed the same old cabinet, position given to their own members. Most of them is even to the technical positions. They appointed mullahs and maulawis and others. Separation of girls, not allowing the co-education in the institution, removing the Ministry of the Women Affairs, which is they have a boards of what they call it, promotion of virtue and prevention of vice department there. So if you just go in the news, we get it, assassination, target killing. If you go to Jalalabad and Nangarhar and other places, it has happened already. But the perception or construct narrative, they were very good in these things, and they destabilized Afghanistan, not now, for decades. I will take more questions because of the timing, but I will leave it here. So just to summarize it, it is not new things. It is from inception or establishment of Pakistan, these things was going on. And they were good, but still many Afghans, when they leave or they just grow up in the madrasas, they don't have roots. They recruited them, and they have a different units for that, different political organization for that. And they're trying to use this still as a non-state actors as their strategic tool to destabilize and also sell it to the international community, just put it like this way. So they will sell these groups, to Chinese, if you don't support us, ETIM will, be destabilize China. They will sell it to IUM. This is just like to Uzbekistan, and then to Tajikistan, and then ISISK and others to the West and other countries. So still they have like commodities, and they want to sell it to the different, buyers and different prices. This has happened, and this will continue for that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Shah Mahmood Mekhel, for very nicely putting it, that it was a collective failure on the international side, and especially that US was looking for virtually an excuse to get out of that, and they were taken for a ride in the process by some other players, and very rightly highlighting the role of Pakistan. And before I request the next speaker, just I would like to add one more, that role of Pakistan, even in Afghanistan, is not only for the fighters and others. One point you might have seen, a lot of degrees of Afghanis are fake degrees issued by a fake University of Karachi. I myself investigated 2 cases where the person had moved up the channel in United Nations in World Food Program, where I was chief of investigation. So in fact, a lot of fake degrees are virtually pumped into Afghanistan over the years. So since like last 20 years or even beyond that. So this is another thing I think maybe Ministry of Education probably should have looked into, or maybe at some future date when some legitimate government is there, they can look into that. So thank you so much for giving us that. And I would now call upon Madam Habiba Sarabi to listen on the women's side, that women and child rights under Taliban. again it was echoing. Radicalization, recruitment of women and child soldiers. So over to Madam Habiba Sarabi.
Thank you very much, Mr. Sandhu. Very good evening and good afternoon, good morning to everyone. Thank you
Ma'am,
very much.
excuse me, ma'am, your voice is quite low.
My voice is low. Okay, I try to speak loudly. Can you hear me now? Hello?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Thank you very much for making this opportunity and to discuss about this very, very important issue, especially for us and as Afghan and Afghan women. It's very important to talk and to raise our voice in different places and various events. So when I want to talk about this women issue, let me to talk a little bit briefly about our position in the past within this 20 years. So Afghan women had a lot of gain within this 20 years. So the gain that we have got it in different fields, starting from a political field in the parliament, that which was 26%, the civil servant 27%, that even the target was 30%. In the military side, in defense force and police force, that Mr. Miakhel, my friend, and he was my boss in some point. He knows that how I think 6% up to 10% in the defense force women were participated. And really, I'm very, very concerned about the women that, let me to share my concern, the women that they were a part of defense force and police force. And so they are all of them, they are hiding at the moment. So in different other, of course, in the we had a number of deputy ministers as an ambassador. And so women had the rights of education, and especially in the education system, the percentage of girls attending to school, even it was more than 40%. All of them was just because of this constitution that we had. We had the best constitution, even it was better than other country in the region, that the constitution gave us legitimacy and also preserve our rights, and women could gain a lot during these 20 years. So because women had the practice that how to work or how to live during the 90s, when Taliban had controlled the whole country, including me. So, but after that, 2001, it was a new era for women, and they have been tried their best to promote themselves. Of course, constitution and the government gave this opportunity also to push and also encourage women to promote themselves. But unfortunately now, so again, the same period, the same practice happened today. Of course, I was one of the 4 women negotiators among the Islamic Republic negotiation team. But even during the negotiation, Taliban, we recognize that Taliban don't believe to women rights. We recognize that Taliban don't believe to human rights. Whenever we were talking about the women's rights, they were talking about this women's rights according to Islamic Sharia, and also according to this tradition. So the tradition is quite different from the law. So always they are just excusing the tradition. Even of course, they were focusing much more on the system of emirate. But whenever we were talking that which sort of regime do you want, some of them were telling to some of our friends that might be the Iranian regime might be a good system. even on the Iranian system, women has the right to go to work, and even for the to as an advisor to the president and the deputy minister, or in different sector they are working. But they again announced children to go to school without announcing for women, for girls. So girls only can go up to grade 6. At the same time, in our culture, in our system, even in the past, the girls' school and boys' school were separately. So it was not co-education. Co-education was on the primary school and primary school, but in some certain area or the urban area, in some place in Kabul or some private school, there was co-education. But culturally, Afghanistan always followed the rule that there will be girls' school and there will be boys' school. At the moment, they are excusing that the security will not allow the girls to go to school. It's just an excuse. Why the security? If the women are going to the street to demonstrate, they are just stopping them and beating them and shut them up to not talk. It's something because they don't believe to women's rights. This is the issue. This is the problem. They think that women as a second a citizen, or the one that they can do their housework and also just I mean, give them birth and give them children. That's all. This is the things that they want to apply like that. So even to university, of course, there are some private university that they are applying a kind of cartoon between two part, girls and boys. But for the Kabul University, they didn't allow women, girls to go for higher education. And for different institution and ministry and different, even the NGOs, all the NGOs, they went, I mean, Taliban went to the door of NGOs and locked their doors, and they are not allowed to be active with the civil society. We had a very active and of course it was young, but we had very active civil society. So now they want to, of course, not to hear anything from women, and the things that they are always, for example, during the press conference or the statement that they are sharing, that okay, we will seek for a kind of principle and rule for women to participate, but it's just because of taking attraction from international community for their legitimacy, for they want a kind of legitimacy. Even for the Doha talk, they wanted to prolong the Doha negotiation because of the to get the legitimacy. Legitimacy is something that they are seeking for that and wanted to get that one through this sort of announcement. But on reality, they don't believe the women's rights and human rights, and also the rights of minority. Minority in Afghanistan now, they are in a very tough situation in the rural area and the province area, that they don't have, the people don't have access to social media or to any other publication. People will not listen to them. We will not be aware what happened to them. The minority situation in Afghanistan, especially the Hazara and Shia people, that Taliban think that we Shia, we are not a good Muslim. They don't believe that Shia will be a, I mean, equal Muslim to other one. So that's why they totally wanted to ignore, and also in some part they even want to punish them. So when we talk, the next subject will be about radicalization. So even before the collapse of Kabul, whenever there was a conference, meeting or something, I was talking about that. that this extremism it will not be only the problem of Afghanistan. It will be the problem if that will not be, the extremism, if we cannot control, or the world and the region country cannot control extremism in the region, in Afghanistan, it will of course spread within the region, and the people from the region will suffer from extremism. And now you can see even the Pakistan, that they were very happy and still happy that Taliban has control in Afghanistan, but they have to recognize, they have to know that one day they will also faced with the same problem of extremism, and now there are some route that coming out, and they are seeking for emirate in Pakistan. And so the things that they wanted to bring for us, and someday they will affiliate with that extremism. And so this is really a big problem, and extremism somehow and connected with the child soldier, because all these children are getting education in the Islamic madrasa, and during this training, of course, they are getting this radicalization, and also getting training on that, and also getting training on this for as a soldier. So, but unfortunately, this abuse of these children is another big problem. It will affect the whole society and the community. This is something that really it is not a problem for Afghanistan. It is a problem. It will be a problem for the whole region if we cannot put hands together and to fight against that. This problem will affect the whole
मैं
region.
आपको एक ऐसी बीमारी के बारे में जिसके हर
Could you check out? There was someone trying to interrupt the meeting.
Okay. At the end, I just want from women across the region that put hand together to stand beside Afghan women, and also put pressure for the Islamic country that Islam is not something that Taliban is applying. There are so many Islamic countries that the women enjoy from their rights in different countries. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Minister Sarabi. I think again there is some, it was echo, so I'm repeating. Thank you very much for putting the women's side of that. And I wanted to sum up all the panelists have said, but just looking at the time, so I will straightway go to the questions. So that is better than one of us could respond to that. The very first question is for Mr. Habiba Sarabi. What is your opinion when it comes to the violent extremism meted out to Afghan women? You have already spoken on that, but I will add to that question so that you can respond to that, because UN Office of Drugs and Crime, as an alternative development program so that people can go away from opium cultivation, they provided alternative means to 28,000 homes, 28,000 households, out of which 48% were women. So they provided those, and some of that work was to be carried out this year in November. So what do you think will happen to those programs? So you can add with the question that I read, both the things together.
The program for opium cultivation, you mean?
No, I mean the alternative employment that UN Office of Drug and Crime provided to the women.
Ma'am, you're on mute.
Unfortunately, due to this, the access of the UN and also even given in the past to the government on the rural area, and still it's the same. The access is a big problem. This program will be carried on a right way if there will be access. Now the Taliban is, of course, they are seeking for the support of the UN agency and also humanitarian assistance for the people. But mostly the management of that and the access of the UN to the rural area is a big problem. It can be helpful if the management system can carry in a right way, and the management system can apply mostly women. But I'm not sure that Taliban can allow women to carry on this program.
Thank you so much. That addresses it. So the next question, I think Ambassador Ashraf Haidari, I will put it to him. The question is, the Durand line carved out in 1893 is artificially dividing the Pashtun-dominated regions of Afghanistan and Pakistan. Do you think India should help Afghanistan address the concerns of the Pashtun population? If so, why? And if not, then why?
Well, not just India, the rest of the world. I think we should leave it up to the people of Afghanistan, and first for the peace and stability to be achieved in Afghanistan with the support of the international community, including India, consistent with international law, and especially the United Nations Charter, Chapter 7. So once peace has prevailed in Afghanistan under an inclusive and representative government, of course, the government of Afghanistan would pursue win-win talks under a parliament that would be representative and inclusive of all Afghans' voices and views on any outstanding disputes. And I think for that to happen, we have to wait and first work on a stabilization of Afghanistan and the formation of an inclusive and representative government in Afghanistan. I think that it's now increasingly premature to talk about disputes and territorial disputes. So we need to really wait and give peace and security and the stabilization of Afghanistan every priority over everything else. And then, of course, the people of Afghanistan would decide the future of our country with the support of like-minded neighbors and countries and the rest of the international community, again, consistent with the international laws.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Haidari. That was very apt and to the point. The next question, either you can respond or Minister Shah Mahmood Miakhil can respond, or both of you. This was already covered by both of you, that's why I'm putting together. What do you think has been the role of USA in this whole scenario from the point they came to the point they left? So the question probably is asking you to address right from the time they came, so to the time they left. So
I'll just say a few words,
please.
and then, of course, let the Deputy Minister speak from military experience. Well, remember that Afghanistan had been in this position back in the 1990s and late 1990s. The Taliban had been ruling Afghanistan, had turned Afghanistan into a no man's land with everyone watching or taking sides in non-constructive ways that unfortunately provided Afghanistan as enabling environment for regional and transnational terrorist networks harbored under the Taliban, and that culminated to 9/11. So what brought the United States into Afghanistan was that tragedy of 9/11 and the loss of 3,000 Americans, and as well as others from the international community and from different faiths. And that's why, of course, for the first time, NATO came together in support of the United States under their collective security provision article of the alliance to stabilize Afghanistan against those threats that brought about 9/11. But unfortunately, as we know, and has been discussed today, and as the Deputy Minister also pointed out, the United States fought the wrong war in the wrong place. How can you fight and win an insurgency where it has external support, full spectrum support which I pointed out, and the details were discussed by the deputy minister. It's impossible to do so. And there are now many books and now many reports, and of course the United States itself has come to such a conclusion that at least indirectly, they may not say it so, but oftentimes the National Intelligence Director, the CIA Director, and so many other intelligence community members of the US government have testified before the United States Congress in multiple hearings saying that the epicenter of terrorism and extremism is right next to Afghanistan. And unless we really address that challenge, we cannot really help stabilize Afghanistan. Remember, Afghanistan had decades and decades of peace before the advent of the imposed conflicts. First, this first Soviet invasion and occupation that radicalized this region, and then the abandoning of Afghanistan by the Clinton administration, which focused on jobs and economic concerns at home at the cost of a decade of what happened and unfolded in Afghanistan that haunted them on 9/11. And as a result, we're seeing the same situation. Where, of course, the wrong war in the wrong place was fought with the sponsor of terrorism and extremism intact, without any kind of punitive action, to which I alluded, including punitive action under international law, especially the UN Charter, Chapter 7, for aggression towards another independent sovereign nation through a proxy infused with regional and transnational terrorist elements. So that was the original sin with the United States coming in the wake of 9/11, leaving Afghanistan in 2003 for Iraq, and pretty much abandoning Afghanistan until 2009 when the Obama administration came. And then, unfortunately, surged troops, but they announced a withdrawal by the end of 2014, which happened. And then Trump comes. Of course, he talks about the conditions-based South Asia strategy, but he quickly abandons that. And then he starts this coercive mediation process, which was to basically negotiate a withdrawal agreement, not a peace agreement, which I and the deputy minister discussed. And President Biden comes and carries out that, and then withdraws from Afghanistan, betraying, unfortunately, the developing democracy of Afghanistan. All gains that we had made with the treasure and blood of the American forces, NATO forces, and as well as contributions from the region, including India, giving Afghanistan over $3 billion towards internal connectivity, external connectivity, reconstruction, human resources development, and so forth. So we, the Afghan people, really see this as a colossal betrayal of the gains of the past 20 years at the cost of regional stability and international peace and security. And that's why the United States Congress is now, especially the Republicans, are talking about a return to Afghanistan, given the intelligence assessments, which, of course, inform the international public of the growing threats under this setup, as their ties have only deepened with Al Qaeda, and as well as providing an enabling environment for Daesh. Remember, Daesh is not organic in Afghanistan; it's very inorganic, splintered. Members of Al Qaeda, the Taliban, TTP, and others, again with cahoots with the regional intelligence agency, which is now using them as a counter to the Taliban, keeping the Taliban in check just in case they go nationalist versus Islamist, which they prefer against the national interests of Afghanistan, which is happening. And that's why they have the favorites inside the Taliban, and those they have just sent back home would come after the capture of Afghanistan to claim that they spoiled, but unfortunately that's been sent back home by the visiting external intelligence chief, simply because they are not loyal to them. They want an Afghanistan that is independent, sovereign, and so forth. So within the Taliban, that division and the implications. So that's where things stand, and that's why our request and demand and expectation from the international community on the recognition is to make sure that those basic conditions are met under international law. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Haidari. Deputy Minister Shah Mahmood, would you like to add, or we go to next question? There, I think you can take over. It's
Yeah,
limited.
just I want to, if you don't mind, I will add
Please.
a couple of points.
Yeah, please go ahead.
One, unfortunately, the US was not able to define their mission in Afghanistan from the very beginning. So they were there for nation building, or they were there for counterterrorism, or they had a strategic interest in Afghanistan. They were not able to define that because if for each goals you need different kind of a strategy or tools to apply. For example, if it was counterterrorism, like Ambassador Haidari just mentioned, so those terrorists were not in Afghanistan. The leaders were just captured and killed in our neighbors, close to Islamabad. So that was some things they didn't address that issue. If they were for counterterrorism, they have to deal with the Pakistan first, then coming to Afghanistan. It was for nation building, then they have to focus on the institution building, which was not happened, but in fact undermining the democratic institution of Afghanistan is there. If it was a strategic interest, then you have a long-term engagement in Afghanistan, in the region, and that's not happened. Unfortunately, it was more reaction to September 11, and they came to Afghanistan, and they didn't have a clear goals and strategy what to do in the long run, because it was just for short-term tactical reason they use their intervention in Afghanistan. And also the NATO countries also did the same things, because when the Iraq war started, so many of European countries, they didn't want to support that. They just came to Afghanistan just to support the PRTs and coming to the counterclock and others. So that was not defining the goals and mission, then you have a problem. This discussion, we had it for many times with the US officials, and unfortunately, they didn't come with the good answers. So then we ended up with such kind of a situation. And one thing was very clear. After the Soviet withdrawal, Geneva Accord was for the Soviet withdrawal. The Doha process was for the US withdrawal. But after many years back, the US came to Afghanistan because they abandoned Afghanistan. They didn't focus on Afghanistan, and this might happen again. So we don't know exactly what will happen, how to these different franchises of terrorist groups will act in the region or in international level, and then what kind of reaction is needed, maybe collectively, individually, and others. I think the trajectory is not good as far as we see. There will be more violence in the region and also in the world, and will be originated from Afghanistan, unfortunately. Yes. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you so much, Mr. Shah Mahmood. I will come. There are 2-3 other questions. You and both Ambassador Haidari can think over on that. Will this rise of Taliban, how it will affect the relations between Afghanistan and Pakistan, and Afghanistan and Iran? But I will come to this question later, because there are 2 questions which showed in the chat, and I think they get priority. So you can meanwhile have your thoughts on that. So the one question from the chat is to Madam Sarabi. As we saw that women put up a protest after the takeover of Taliban, what role do you think international organizations like UN Women have in such a situation? Over to you.
Thank you. First of all, I have to say that the women that they started to protest, they are very, very, courageous. They are the champion, the new champion, the new leader of women in Afghanistan, because many left, including me. I was in Doha and couldn't go back, but many left Afghanistan. They are the champion of and the new leader for the Afghan women. They had the courage to stand against the Taliban and stand in front of them and look to their eyes and hang and show their protest. So the UN Women and other organizations, they have to put pressure to the UN system for the not recognize and legitimize, give legitimacy to Taliban government. This is something that they can do, and also making a kind of network among the women in the world that put pressure to Taliban for giving chance to women, or giving for their rights, the chance for their rights for education, especially, and the rights of their to go to work. This is something that the UN Women and all the other agencies can do it.
Thank you so much. That was very solid response. And before I come to that previous question on relations, I think there is another urgent question which needs addressing. It is directly addressed to Sir Shah Mahmood Miakhel. It says that after the fall of Afghan government, when assertion of Northern Alliance became evident, do you think the resistance to Taliban by Afghan army could have been stronger, and the quick fall could have been prevented if the government had focused more on the potential of Northern Alliance and facilitated an early joint endeavor and an alliance against Taliban? If you, over to you, Minister Shah Mahmood.
First of all, Northern Alliance, so-called, whatever you call it, it is not existing, because many leaders of the Northern Alliance, they were in Pakistan. They were mingling with them. They
Sir, please unmute yourself.
I think it's okay now. Yeah.
Yes, sir.
So first of all, just this idea of Northern Alliance, it is not existing anymore, because most of the Northern Alliance leaders, they were in Pakistan. So Pakistan took them to Islamabad. In order to please them, you will be part of the inclusive government, but that's not happened. Yes, the army had a capability, but unfortunately, there was a vacuum of leadership. And that created environment, people didn't fight because the message was not clear. Because when the fall of the provinces started from Farah and then Badakhshan and others, so many people are saying, okay, this is, they use this tactics. These are part of the Doha agreement. 17 provinces will be handed over to the Taliban. So that kind of things has happened, and then people didn't fight. And unfortunately, the government didn't come with clear messages. No, this is not part of that agreement or something like that way, and we will resist and fight. And they didn't capture all of these provinces and other places by fighting, because they didn't have a capability, they didn't have to run those areas, and also they didn't have foot soldiers in there. So that was this connection between the rank and files and the leadership created this kind of fallout. But I believe, we are not in easy situation now to build a credible resistance also, because for credible resistance, you need a credible leaders, which is, key for that. Unfortunately, it is missing right now, but in the long run, it will be emerged from inside the country, from the cities, provinces, and others, because people cannot tolerate this government, this kind of tactics they use it. Already you see the demonstrations, reaction to the government. And now there's a social media, there's a, access to information and others. So things will change. But I don't believe that was the situation, because many, if you just go by definition of Northern Alliance, many of these people who were part of the Northern Alliance, they were in charge for the security sectors. Minister of Defense, he was the member of the Northern Alliance in that time. And so that was not the case.
Unfortunately, we have very few minutes left, but I still am. I have to give the floor to Ambassador Haidari to address that question about how it will affect the relations between the two neighboring countries, Afghanistan, Pakistan, and Afghanistan, Iran. There are some more questions, but we will see subsequently. So I think that will be the last question. Please go ahead. You are on mute, Ambassador.
I said that's an open-ended question, very general. We have always maintained good ties with our neighbors, including Iran and Pakistan. Remember, the peoples of our region are some of the most youthful populations of the world, where they share common interests in human security and protective security, knowing that unless we join forces against sources of protective insecurity, meaning terrorism, extremism, and drug trafficking, human trafficking, and so forth, it's really hard for the entire region to address the human security challenges consistent with the 2030 Sustainable Development Goals that we all need to work together to ensure in our region. Just for example, Afghanistan has been hit by conflict, COVID-19, and as well as climate. And that's why we have a very complex humanitarian crisis with far-reaching implications in terms of spillover effects, including exodus of refugees into Iran and Pakistan. So while certain institutions within the governments of the region pursue short-sighted, short-term strategic interests and whatever games that they're playing of geopolitics, and we've discussed that today, it is in their medium and long-term best interest to help stabilize Afghanistan and to deepen further people-to-people ties between India and Afghanistan, of course, but Afghanistan and Pakistan, Afghanistan and Iran. We also encourage in this light, concrete steps by Pakistan and India towards a rapprochement, a normalization and rationalization of their relationship, costing foremost the two nations, but also the rest of the region. Imagine if, South Asia, the totality of South Asia's human resources and natural resources were harnessed. We could see rapid, of course, progress along all sustainable development goals, benefiting the peoples of this region as a result, ensuring long-term regional stability and security. Knowing that, of course, rising Asia would be impossible without security in South Asia and Central Asia, where Afghanistan is right at the heart of these two important regions of a rising Asia. And that's why the role of China is very important. China also needs to take note and take concrete and constructive steps in terms of its relationship with India and, of course, the rest of the region, and as well as Russia. And so that's why our position all along has been to join the SCO, the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, which is now inclusive, including Pakistan and India, China and Russia, and as well as our Central Asian states, to work on our common goals, on the one hand, against terrorism and extremism and drug trafficking, on the other hand, on socioeconomic development to ensure the human security of the entire region through SCO, now that NATO has departed from Afghanistan. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Haidari. I wish we could have continued, because this subject all of us can discuss for hours and hours together. But since we have completed the time, so I would not take the opportunity to give you more time to anyone, including me. I wanted to sum it up, but I thank all three of you, Ambassador Haidari and Deputy Minister Shah Mahmood Miakhal and Deputy Minister Habiba Sarabi. It has been a pleasure listening to you and interacting with you. And I look forward to joining you somewhere else in future again to continue this discussion or at individual levels. And I also thank Yashash Arya and his organization, Indic Research Forum. They are doing a great job. So please keep it up. And we have exceeded by 2 minutes. So with this, I will thank everybody and all the participants and all those who sent questions. There are one question I could not, because the time is there, that what role UN have played and could have played. We can address it offline sometimes later. So with this, thank you everybody, and over to you, Yashas. No.
Thank you, sir. Thank you everyone for joining this session. My colleague Satya will take over right now. Over to you, Satya.